Hello.
Paranormal Activity. Any particular scene or character you'd like to discuss first?
Mika.
Who? Mika, okay. So what have you observed?
The same narcissistic, egotistical personality that we've seen in every.
Do you see a thread here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And it's always the guy.
it's a hard fact to swallow, isn't it? Yep. So we have another significant other who seems not only self-absorbed, but certainly feels that to make this account or film, and we're thankful that he has in retrospect, but to make this account, he will sacrifice most things, right? Even when, is it Kate?
Katie.
Right? Chrissy's the sister, right?
Yeah, Katie.
Katie. Even when Katie asks him, frequently to turn off the camera, he prioritizes keeping that camera on. Right. So yeah, I think if you want to talk about egocentrism, if you want to talk about self-absorption, we have another character now, certainly that would be a significant risk factor for developing a mental disorder, especially a personality disorder. Anything else we know about Micah? Other than today's the anniversary date when his body was discovered, right?
Oh yeah, I noticed that. It was like October.
Did you notice that?
Whatever date it is. Did you do that on purpose?
Who would do that on purpose? You give me too much credit. Of course I did it on purpose. That's why you're going to blog on it today. What else? Anything else done? Again, I keeping consistent with this theme of egocentrism, he has this one goal. And if it weren't for him defying what people around him that he loves the most, in terms of what they were asking of him, we would never know the account that has come to be known as Paranormal Activity. Right? So he's feeding us, and we asked for this. So there's that component of it too. Right? I mean, I know you were assigned the film, but the fact of the matter is, almost a decade after this film is made, you're watching it. Thanks to Micah or Mika.
I think there's something about like the reliving of every time he would film things. Like in the beginning it was like everything, the bedroom scenes, the cars, like everything. And he would relive certain aspects of it, and I'm like, he just gets some type of like arousal from that. I thought that was kind of like the fact he doesn't want to involve with looking at a demonologist or like whatever, and he wants to have that control.
Mm-hmm.
And that arousal aspect of I don't know, I thought that was very peculiar.
If someone were to have made the observation that by staring through the camera and having his immediate environment in a frame, that it somehow, in his mind, distanced himself from what was going on, would you buy into that? I mean, I've seen something similar on The Family Guy when Peter Griffin does it. Right? I mean, he actually had a box and he pretended everything.
Oh yeah, I love
right? That is a sense of emotional distancing. So I know we're looking at Micah and we're using this word egocentrism, but might it be the result of something even more? And might his staying behind that camera allow him or offer him some form of protection from his immediate surroundings? And by the way, when I say immediate surroundings, I don't mean immediate surroundings that are haunted, because he's doing this even before the first bump in the night. Which then, of course, as a clinician, what are some questions you want to know? So this thought, my thought, pops in your mind, right, for thought broadcasting. And from your perspective, thought insertion, right? So that comes up on exams, by the way, so take that down. What do you want to know from Micah? If you're thinking that maybe being behind the camera gives him that sense of comfort, that sense of protection, The first question I would ask is, when you don't have the camera in your hand, how do you feel? And does the answer include something along the lines of anxiety? And then, of course, if the answer is yes, then what is it that we're talking about, right? And our differential will be broad. I'm also worried about a sense of hypervigilance too, right? That maybe gets framed, maybe gets compartmentalized, even reduced when that camera goes on. Right? Now again, he may tell us no, and he may reliably tell us no, so there's probably nothing else to see here, but I think that's a valid question here. Because it does persist. And it might be because of his needed legacy. He needed us to know his work in 2021 and beyond. That can certainly be, and probably is it. But there also may be something safe with regard to seeing the world through an artificial lens, and not just the one that's in front of your retina. Which is interesting, because when you think about that, and you think about potential etiologies for his anxiety if it were in fact endorsed, there's a nice parallel now in something that he shares with his girlfriend, Katie. So let's unless there's other observations you want to make and discuss about Micah, let's talk about Katie. Observations?
She's clearly trying to suppress her past. She gets angry because every time she revisits what happened before, seems like she went through a fire, and she makes a statement saying, no one found the cause of it. It was not a criminal act, and she's like qualifying it a lot. So you almost want to start thinking, saying, does she have anything to do with it?
Right. And as a clinician, I think it is clinically acceptable to assume the position that she did have something to do with it. Now, when we say this clinically, we don't mean then we call 911. That's not what we're doing this. But if you can get into that frame of mind, then, and only then, will you ask the right questions. And if the questions turn out to be a negative, so be it. Right? So, for all intents and purposes, let's say that we found out, and it is revealed, yes, she set that fire, which I think is reasonable. Let's take a step back from practicing psychiatry, and let's talk more about literature. What might that mean? What role do fires play in literature?
Hellfires or like satanic rituals or something.
Could be attached to a ritual.
Purifying?
Yeah, reborn.
Purification, right? Yep, purification. So, and the same holds true. I mean, there's a reason why that's the symbol in literature. It's because it's part of our collective unconscious, right? Literature only mimics what is deep-rooted in our subconscious or unconscious. It unlocks that. So we have to ask, what does she purify? Anybody here see Paranormal Activity 2? Paranormal Activity 3? Because your answer's in Paranormal Activity 3. Which are me, all three, great films. The answer's there. I'll give it away in a little bit. All right? But you can now begin to see where this might be going. We may as well talk about it now. Skipping over Paranormal Activity 2, which really focuses on Katie's sister's home and family. That's Chrissy. Paranormal Activity 3 focuses on the sisters when they were young. I mean, I think 6 and 8 maybe. All right? Here's the dilemma, and I want you to play film producer now. Paranormal Activity, the original, met with significant box office success. Now, number one, kind of drawing in what we discussed from Seinfeld this morning, one of the advertising gimmicks that they used, and used it perfectly, was making the announcement that in some theaters there would be a priest available if you were disturbed after the movie.
That reminds me of like in The Exorcist, when The Exorcist came out with the barf bags.
Yep. Right? Nice gimmick. And boy, did people flock to the theaters. Right? And the reason why it was so successful was because it was a first-person account. It was found footage, which really was part of a big-time movement in the motion picture industry. Thank you for, or related to the Blair Witch Project, right? Paranormal Activity 2 starts with a break-in. Right? It looks like a normal break-in. Of course, we all know it's going to be Satan. But it's a break-in nonetheless. So Chrissy, that is Katie's sister's, specifically her husband, installs security cameras, surveillance cameras in the house because of that break-in. And now we get to see everything from that perspective. So they figured out a way to make the sequel found footage too. But now we're talking about something that occurred in the 80s. The writer-producer has to make it a timepiece set in the 80s, but at the same time must come up with a clever idea on how to make it found footage. You're not going to sacrifice money. So how did they get around this? Any guesses? I know you can see it. Any guesses?
Camcorder.
Right. And who is holding that camcorder? Again, it isn't somebody like Micah that's just wanting to record what's going on with regard to a new home. That's been done already. So we got to figure out the way to do it again, but not make it appear like we're doing it again.
Katie.
Close enough, right? Chrissy and Katie's mom is either divorced or widowed, and she has a boyfriend named Dennis, who buys a new camcorder, and just because of the novelty of this, it is the 80s, is always has it on, including following these little girls into their bedroom. Now, when you watch this in the theater, when you watch this on Netflix, it seems pretty ordinary. Like, oh, look at this, and that's that, because you're looking at it as, oh, now we're depicting what happened to these little girls when they were younger. But when you say it out loud, it certainly feels and sounds wrong, right? Because he's in there during the night, recording them even in bed, right? And it's, again, not their biological father. It's mom's new boyfriend. Right? So now when you put that together with the burning down of the house and the need to purify, you have a movie and now even a franchise that likely depicts early childhood sexual trauma. And the more contemporary film, the one you saw, the original, which takes place during their adult life, certainly would be a product, that is, whatever this film is about, is the product of that trauma. Questions? Are there aspects of either depersonalization or derealization in this movie? I got a yes. Can you give me the scene?
When she's like, I don't know if this is really, but she was like outside a bunch of times, or he would find her in like random places, and she would like not really realize she was there, or not really say much, not even be able to talk sometimes.
In the scene that you observed and in the scene that you're describing, is there any evidence that that behavior is resulting in clinically significant distress or impairment in any of her roles?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that means, by definition, Paranormal Activity, the original, must be about depersonalization, derealization disorder. Of course, as long as we rule out that Katie isn't using a substance like hallucinogen or has an underlying medical condition that could explain that feeling of depersonalization. Okay? Why is that not true? Like I'm taking your shelf exam, depersonalization, derealization disorder, it may be choice A. And in the clinical vignette, it may be definitive that there is no substance. There's no substance use disorder. And it may be definitive that there is no underlying medical condition. Do not choose choice A. depersonalization, derealization disorder until you do what? Until you investigate whether or not there are gaps in memory that cannot be explained by normal forgetfulness. Because if there is, what is the diagnosis?
Association.
Dissociative amnesia. Exactly right. Another way to state this is that dissociative amnesia is in fact amnesia for which no underlying organic or medical condition can explain the period of forgetfulness. As part of the definition of dissociative amnesia, individuals will often demonstrate or report to you feelings of depersonalization and or derealization, meaning that those two phenomena actually occur within the context of a broader disorder called dissociative amnesia. So if the individual does demonstrate these gaps in memory, dissociative amnesia is the single best answer. And dissociative amnesia will incorporate aspects of both depersonalization and or derealization. What is the subtype of dissociative amnesia? Fugue state, right? So we have dissociative amnesia with fugue and without fugue. Now, just before we go on any further with regard to reviewing your shelf, before we review and analyze paranormal activity, is there any evidence that Katie is using a substance? I don't think so either. Is there any evidence that Katie has an underlying medical condition at all? Period. Even if it's high blood pressure, a hangnail, anything? No. All right. So we're safe in proceeding in this direction. A fugue state, dissociative fugue. The fugue state is some seemingly purposeful movement or travel, usually away from one's home, where there's an assumption of a new identity. Is there any evidence of that here? No. So maybe just dissociative amnesia. Okay. Any questions about depersonalization, derealization disorder, or dissociative amnesia with or without fugue? We're good here? All right. If the individual demonstrates a state of consciousness that results in the dissociative amnesia, that is, there is a personality change that takes over one's conscious awareness, they likely have a condition called dissociative identity disorder. And again, as of 2013, as per the publication of the DSM-5, this could be experienced as a form of possession in some cultures. If we watch this entire movie, I think we're operating with the provisional of dissociative amnesia without fugue until perhaps that final scene. Because what happens in that final scene?
Kills him.
Who kills him?
Well,
Probably, right? Right. So to the extent that there is a distinct personality state that took over Katie's conscious awareness, this movie actually turns out to be DID, spoiler alert, albeit in the last 7 minutes. So up until that time, we're thinking maybe dissociative amnesia, because she clearly has no recollection of events when Micah brings her in from outside. The discussion the morning after specifically focused, he's mentioning things like you were catatonic, you weren't there. She has no recollection of it, right? Dissociative amnesia. And that would be the provisional answer. Can you think of any reason other than substances or medical condition that may result you in not feeling comfortable leaving the conversation, leaving the medical record as it currently stands with DID being the most likely diagnosis? Is there any evidence that Katie is irritable, is having difficulty sleeping, difficulty concentrating, or has a loss of interest? Would most of us feel comfortable then saying there may be a depressive disorder that at least is co-occurring here. Right? Okay, so we're okay with that. So now that we got that out of the way, again, she's demonstrating some depressive symptoms. What if, I know this was not captured in the film per se, but what if she also demonstrated what looked like obsessions and what looked like panic attacks?
PTSD.
Yeah. That's post-traumatic stress disorder. Right. And again, we've got the etiology, and we've discussed already that DID has a significant comorbidity with post-traumatic stress disorder. So before we move on and say that DID is the most likely diagnosis, it may be wrapped up or at least closely related to post-traumatic stress. And to the extent that she does demonstrate signs and symptoms of PTSD, specifically irritability, poor concentration, difficulty sleeping, and even loss of interest, yes, they're part of the SIGI caps, but they're also part of the PTSD definition as well. That's something that as clinicians we have to keep in the back of our mind. The giveaway, which I was trying to give away, you nailed it, is that other anxiety disorders also masquerade as post-traumatic stress disorder. So people with PTSD can get misdiagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder because their intrusive thoughts are misinterpreted by a clinician as obsessions. And their physiologic reactivity may be misinterpreted as panic attacks. So taken together, PTSD has to be a consideration. So it's likely if the clinician could actually think through and believe that treatment planning would be optimized by making two diagnoses, that both diagnoses will appear in the medical record. Certainly, if the treatment plan is not going to be changed by a secondary diagnosis, we'll leave it off the medical record. There's no reason to throw another diagnostic label into the chart when you literally are not going to do anything about it. So if this is something that you feel comfortable focusing primarily on PTSD, diagnose PTSD. If, on the other hand, the inclusion of DID in the medical record results in an altered treatment plan that you feel as though is needed and medically necessary, that's when you include the second or secondary diagnosis. Treatment. Certainly PTSD and DID is psychotherapy as a core treatment for both. PTSD, in addition, has some FDA-approved pharmacotherapy, likely starting within the SSRI class, and then some other variants as well that we can discuss more offline. But that really is the focus of a biopsychosocial treatment plan. Psychotherapy first and core with probably an SSRI in the cases of post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, what if the patient came to you and said that even if it isn't when the distinct personality state takes over my conscious awareness, I'm not sure they use that actual vocabulary, but I've got these dissociative states, this numbing, and that might be attributed to PTSD, that's part of the PTSD definition. But perhaps more specifically, this feeling of my aspects of myself not being real. Right? And if they, in and of themselves, become clinically significant, and you deem that they require independent clinical attention, is there another medication you'd consider? What is the neurophysiology, the neurobiology of what I'm explaining? The neurobiology of dissociation focuses on what in the central nervous system? The mu opioid receptor, right? Or an endogenous opioid system mediates these periods of dissociation. So anything that blocks the mu opioid receptor, right? And we often do prescribe that.
I thought it was just for mutilation behavior, like self-harm.
No. The reason why you use it for self-harm behavior, this is naltrexone, is because of the dissociative state that the patient is in during the self-mutilation, during the cutting. When your patient cuts, the question is why? What benefit do you get from it? And if you hear that it grounds them, like sometimes it's explained that a balloon bursts, well, that means they're dissociating, they're numb. And that's what you're focusing on. You're not focusing on the behavior. You're focusing on what's causing the behavior, which is the numbing that the patient is trying to get by. Right. Similarly, other forms or other episodes of dissociation are also treated with naltrexone. Revia, R-E-V-I-A, is the brand name. So that's on the table. If our patient also said, and I don't think there's any doubt that she's going to have recurrent nightmares, another medication for this in the context of PTSD. Yeah. So an alpha agonist to focus on the nightmares when you deem that the nightmares warrant independent clinical attention. So that's the way clinicians, prescribers, should go about discussing the available therapies, specifically pharmacotherapies, for this cluster. Questions? Any other characters you want to tackle today? All right, we'll leave it here. Again, I think the teaching points are